Tell us a little bit about how you conceive of education as an issue that's important to business.
Well, I mean, the statistics are pretty startling. In Texas today, of 25 to 35-year-olds, only about 30% of Texans have any kind of post-secondary degree or certificate. I mean, I'm not talking about UT necessarily. I'm talking about ITT or getting a certificate from Austin Community College. Any post-secondary certificate or degree at all, only 30% of Texans have one of those. That compares to an national average of about 42%. And that number needs to rise to 60% very quickly. About 2/3 of the jobs that will be created between now and 2020 will require some form of post-secondary education of one sort or another. So we're looking at an enormous skills gap. And our focus is on increasing the productivity pre-K through community colleges, through higher ed, to meet the needs of the employers. My biggest personal fear is that we will not have an educated workforce and the jobs will go elsewhere. I always think, my wife and I are very blessed. We have 3 children, all of whom graduated from college. And they're all employed, thank goodness. But I worry about the kind of Texas they'll be in 20 years. And their children will be in 20 years in terms of the kind of economy. 18% of adults in Texas lack a high school diploma. And according to Dr. Murdoch, our demographer, or former demographer, unfortunately that number is growing. And it's a recipe for disaster. So our hope is to engage the business community as a leader, as a critical friend of education at all levels, and hold the systems more accountable for their performance.
Now, how did that position as a critical friend, let's start with K through 12,
okay,
kind of affect the agency's sort of policy recommendations and positions in the last session?
Well, I don't know that we were at battle with the agency so much during the last session. I mean, prior to that, I have felt like the public school accountability system came nowhere near reflecting reality. I mean, they created a system that they had at one point, they had 70% of the campuses in Texas is either exemplary or some other higher rating, I can't remember the exact name, but recognized, exemplary or recognized, at a time when only about 2/3 of the kids graduate from high school in 4 years, and half of the kids who show up at the community college doors have to take remedial courses. I mean, the two of them, there's a disconnect somewhere.
Recognized for what, one might ask.
Exactly. Yeah. So our point was that we wanted to have an honest system, because we believe if we tell Texas where we are today, Texans will react in a way as a critical friend, if you will, and hold the systems accountable. I think we're getting a false impression from the agency, or were, during that time. And so when I was a critic, and people would say, well, that's not true, the superintendent says we're doing great. And the superintendent says, well, we're rated exemplary. How is it we're not great? Well, they weren't great. And then 3 years ago, a brand new system came on, STAR, and the end of course exams, which we were very supportive of. And actually the education community supported it. I would say our battles more recently with the agency are over the implementation of the new accountability system. It's my belief that the commissioner did not prepare the education community at all for what was coming. There was a total lack of guidelines of any sort. I mean, essentially there was radio silence from the agency at a time when we were bringing on board an entirely new accountability system. There were many very legitimate unanswered questions about the new system and the administration of it. You put that on top of the fact that even though many superintendents supported it, they were very concerned because they knew what was coming. The end of course exams are much more rigorous than the old system. And they would reflect, in a sense, badly on the educational community because they would be telling the truth, whereas the old system did not tell the truth. I mean, they got credit, for, I call it an Enron-style system. They got credit for, fake earnings in a sense. We're strongly supportive of the new system. We think it'll be much better, but the agency has led to a lot of consternation, legitimate, on the part of the school districts. And there's been a tremendous backlash now. There's a massive effort on the part of school districts and superintendents to roll back the new accountability system, which is just now going into place now. So we're heavily engaged. We've written a lot of letters. We've done op-eds and even a full-page ad in the Statesman on the issue.
Right, which some people took as unkind in tone, perhaps.
Well, I'd be happy to talk about that if you like.
Well, I'm just curious what you. I mean, more specifically, what you think the interim solution is. I mean, is it that the agency needs to kind of get off the dime and prepare the districts? Do you think the districts have enough of a legitimate complaint that rolling back is a reasonable response? Or?
Well, I mean, specifically, the agency needs to get it on the job. And I mean, they've really known about this for 5 years. Legislation passed 5 years ago that set us on this path. And then 3 years ago, the final legislation was passed and signed into law. So the agency and the community, et cetera, have had full time to full warning. I mean, this is not something that came overnight, and they supported the change. Then you have the agency not doing its diligence in terms of explaining the administration, and they're legitimate, very legitimate questions. And the issue, the hottest issue was the issue of whether the exam should count for 15% of a student's grade. The commissioner made the decision, which we supported in the end, to waive the 15% requirement for this year based on the fact that they hadn't been given proper instruction. So we said, okay, we'll stop fighting about the 15% for this year because our goal is to maintain the system, or as much of it as we possibly can, in the coming years when we know there'll be a full onslaught trying to do away with it. I mean, I don't know, I hear different numbers, but 40, 50, 100 school districts have passed resolutions calling for wholesale changes in the system.
So you think that was a reasonable, so from your position, it was kind of a reasonable compromise to keep the system undergoing and
sure.
continue to work out
the way it works
difficulties.
at the end of course exams, which are far superior to the old way where we had one test for all of high school. I mean, there's no accountability in that. End of course exams, you take algebra, you take a course exam, and we know how the students did on that particular subject and how the teacher did, et cetera, et cetera. And we thought it's important that the exam count for a part of the grade because it engages the students more in the outcome. Also, one thing that happened was that many districts, because of the lack of instruction as to how to interpret 15%, I mean, to me, it's pretty straightforward. Is 15% of your final grade? Even I can figure out what that means. But districts were saying that we don't know how to administer it, we don't know what everybody's going to, and some of them came up with these schemes where the 70 is passing. So they were going to say that anybody who got between 0 and a 69 gets a 69, and anybody who gets between 70 and 100 gets 100. Well, I can cite my own family. I mean, we have 2 boys and a girl, and the boys never experienced any academic anxiety. So if they had cruised into Algebra 1 exam with 73, they would have figured out that if they got a 0 on the test, they'd get a 69, and so they get a 72 in the course, negating the value or the importance of the test. They'd sign their name and say, I'm done. Conversely, our daughter, who would have studied hard and done well, although fearing failure at the same time, would have gone in, perhaps gotten a 95, and she gets the same credit as someone who got a 70. I mean, it was ridiculous. They do have the fact that they have to have a cumulative passing grade. That's maintained. But at the same time, we felt like it was important that they maintain the 15% rule. Now, I've said publicly, and it's our position, that we're willing to waive the 15% the first time the test is administered. The kids who are now 9th graders are the first kids to take the test, and they will be the first 10th graders, 11th, et cetera. And so we say, okay, waive the 15% for all of them in return for maintaining the new system, because we think it will reap benefits. If I could quickly add, the one other thing that people don't take into account is that initially the passing rate or the cut score on the exam will be embarrassingly low because the politics of it are such that Robert Scott, the commissioner, is not going to fail 60% of the kids because they missed, they got below 70 out of 100. I mean, it's going to be closer to 30 out of 100. It's going to be passing. And then they'll take the results and say that, I don't know what the numbers will be, but 50 is an A and 45 is a B, et cetera, et cetera. So not everybody's going to fail, as some would have you believe. And then over time, as they've done in the past, they'll ratchet up the cut score and the kids will respond.